We're gonna switch it up now and talk some House of the Dragon. We're not gonna get into a full episode review or anything like that. I just want to touch base with you after episode 6. Obviously, a very we spoke like on when I was touching on this last week with Jerry. We were kind of discussing how episode 5 was a very moving the chessboard, or with Tom, sorry, moving the pieces around the chessboard. For kind of the season as a whole. What were your thoughts on kind of, we had obviously the highlights where Massaria and Rhaenyra getting stuck in. We had Sea Smoke, who's going to ride him. We had Paddy Constantine back as Viserys. We had obviously Aemon sacking the entire board, coming in, so really kind of making it. Then we had Aegon wake up, and he got a little pep talk from Larys. What were your thoughts on episode 6 and how this kind of set up the last two episodes?
I'm finding House of Dragon to be very interesting this time around because everyone's discussing it, and I think the way media is being consumed nowadays, people are just automatically on the defensive, and I feel like that they're really, really doing that with this now. Some people seem to be losing steam, and the format now is kind of like a parody of what Game of Thrones was. So, as much as I enjoyed parts of this episode, Kelly, my partner, made actually a very, very good point. Is that in Game of Thrones, when it was in its heyday, when everyone was watching it, every scene switch was a, "Ooh, let's see what this person's doing now. Shh, be quiet." And every single part of it was exciting. But they're doing this very cheap thing where it's build, 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 and then by the time you get into the the delivery, the stuff that you paid to see, the real meat of the story, you're kind of on that thing where you're also at the same time waiting for that black screen and that written by, directed by
Mm.
splash to come up. So that is kind of how I'm feeling about the House of Dragon right now, and I do agree with a lot of people who are kind of getting a bit weirded out by the pacing of it. Like you said, moving the pieces was cool. I was feeling that there was going to be some big delivery with the Sept scene when they were leaving that riot. And that looked like it was going to kick off, and then again, like we're saying, it didn't. Because I guess with House of the Dragon, we have the book it's based on is a historical retelling. And in the world of Westeros, we know how much propaganda, hearsay, and rumor can affect the story. So even though we know, well, those of us who have the big encyclopedia books have paid a lot of attention during our 117th rewatch of Game of Thrones, know the story and how it's going to unfold. That's what Westeros knows. So they do have the ability to change the story and then to just say, yeah, that was propaganda just to make the kingdom look good or to make
Mm.
the blacks look bad or whatever. So they have the opportunity to not just stick to this linear storyline. They can go off and they kind of have verged with Damon's story, and no one likes that. So nothing is my same criticism probably of Deadpool and Wolverine. What's actually happening? Some of
Mm.
these feel like filler episodes, and I'm looking forward to whatever this delivery is going to be. But I just feel as a fan, I'm kind of being shortchanged.
Okay, I think that's fair, and I think I'm loving it, and I'm loving kind of the return to the pace of Game of Thrones, where it's very day to day, where this we're gonna see the consequences of this, and that's kind of the benefit to this season over season one, where they had to be very broad strokes over a long period of time, because essentially season one was a prologue. It was season zero, and this is actually the real story of what we're getting to. I like the scenes, and I think it's very well written and very well executed. I think where the show leaves me lacking is sometimes they'll just bring up. So, for example, Sir Stefan this week, we've just met him, and now he's a tragic death, and we have to kind of be like, oh, well, I can't feel too sad about that. I didn't know the man. Um, we've got kind of Alan and Adam, or every time I see them, because every time Alan goes onto the screen, it feels like you have like Corliss or someone being like, Alan. And then the second he comes on the screen, I'm like, Alan, Alan, Steve, Steve. So Adam Hull isn't Adam Hull to me, he's Steve. Because I'm like, Steve, Steve. So Steve basically is now, we're left to assume, Sea Smoke's Dragon Rider, and I thought that was quite well done because um it kind of, again, it hammers home the stuff that like Viserys brought back, like a quote in season one, and he was like, "We're fools to think that we can tame these beasts." And Viserys obviously was someone who he was the last rider of the Great Balerion, but he never chose to ride a dragon again afterwards because he just, again, he's. I think he's very skeptical about the approach of we are the masters of these gods. And they are very and we got that a bit with Sea Smoke this week, where it's kind of we're at the mercy of their whims, you know. um no one understands how dragon riding works. No one understands how a dragon is specifically bonded, which makes this kind of period of Rhaenyra trialing essentially non-Targaryens, or non kind of royal, formal and acknowledged Targaryens as dragon riders. It makes it really interesting. Um the problem with it is that it does feel like we're getting kind of, it feels like you're starving and you're waiting for a good meal, and instead you have a McDonald's meal. You know what I mean? It's not bad, but there's still a bit left over, and you're just like, that just didn't do what I wanted it to do in terms of like the full episode. Like I started sitting up towards the end when they're like, Sea Smoke has a rider, and then Rhaenyra goes off, and then she goes out, and I'm like, oh shit. And then the credits came up, and I'm like,
Yeah, and that's my
oh.
point exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was literally just fucking sitting up and going for it. So I totally understand that and appreciate that. But I also think that this show is quite good at moving the pieces. I feel like it's telling its story confidently. And sometimes that can be unsatisfying for us. But then when you look at how amazing episode 4 Rook's Rest was, um, it can hit the high points, and I think we won't care about this when it doesn't hit it, and we'll also understand where the characters are, because the individual plot building is quite interesting. Like Aemon, for example, getting in and sacking the entire board, and kind of calling for Otto Hightower. But what's going on with Otto? Why isn't he writing back to anyone? You have Allison talking to Gawain, going, "Have you, BT Dubs? Have you heard anything from Dad?" Um, what I loved about this episode, though, is, and it just coincided perfectly because I was at a wedding last weekend before I watched this, and I got chatting to a fellow Song of Ice and Fire obsessive, a big book reader, and we got into a really deep 3 a.m. Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragons discussion. And one thing they were saying was how a lot of people don't fully understand and appreciate, and even the shows don't fully grasp George R. R. Martin's kind of vision of this, which is that war as a whole is horrible.
Mm.
And the victims and everyone in it is a bad person. And I like that, because I think we saw that here, in that Rhaenyra saw opportunity in King's Landing being starved. She saw opportunity to win political favor, and she's supposed to be the morally right one. And in theory, she is, but she's like, no, I can use this for my own political gain. This episode then came along at a perfect time when we're having this discussion. It's called Small Folk, and it's very much about the will and power of the small folk here, and how they're actually the victims of all of this, and how everyone is just kind of overlooking them and using them as pawns. You had that discussion in the council where Eamon's like, well, why are they mad at us? And it's a very good question, but then they're like, well, you're the king. And it's like, yeah, but I'm not the one stopping it. And it's like, yeah, well, win the war. Like, if you want to stop them, win the war,
Yeah.
they're going to be pissed off at you. So, it's very interesting that they're teasing all those elements and components out. And if it all goes somewhere, I'll be very happy with it. And I feel like it is going somewhere positive. But we are at a tipping point now. Like, after giving us something as epic as Rook Rest, and as that really ticked all of our Game of Thrones boxes and had us on up to here with the show. Now they've tested our patience a little bit with 2 kind of moving the pieces episodes. So
Yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like they need to now we're getting into the second last episode, and it's like, you need to give us a penultimate Game of Thrones level episode here. What do you need, and what does this season need to do to be kind of a runaway success? And also, where is the potential for this season? If it delivers upon this, could this be as good as any season of Game of Thrones, or is it competing to be kind of, a fine season of television? Where is this season pitched in your head in terms of how it's delivered so far?
Yeah, I mean, like, I do have criticisms of it, but I'm still really, really enjoying it. I do know I've talked to some people who have dropped off. which I'm finding interesting because
Mm.
it's they could release the worst Game of Thrones show ever. I'm still gonna watch it out of morbid curiosity.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know. There's rumors now about a like another Game of Thrones series coming out now, like a Robert Baratheon centric one, not his rebellion more so, but maybe like an early days. I don't know. There's rumors flying around, so you kind of have to think about like where could they wrap up House of the Dragon, and I can't go with obviously into any
Yeah,
spoilers, but
yeah.
there's one or two very obvious ones, and then they could like completely jump the shark by going all the way up into the Mad King, which I think would be a big mistake.
Mm.
Uh, they kind of need to just focus on these characters other than the reign of the Targaryens themselves. So I don't know. I think unfortunately this is not going to be a Frasier or something else, a spin-off that becomes so separate to its original. Whereas I think this House of Dragons has established itself and it will always be a Game of Thrones spin-off and it
Yeah.
will sit underneath that shadow. Um, I think they're a little bit too late in the season to really make this really be something that matters, like I said, because the big fans among us know exactly how the Dance of the Dragon Civil War plays out. So I don't know we could still get two solid episodes, but I think it'll be like some of the later episodes of the last season of Game of Thrones. Was like that was a good episode, but the season as a whole was a miss.
Mm.
So I'm kind of hoping that they can at least pique everyone's interest going into whatever's next.
I'm a bit more optimistic on it than you, while also appreciative of kind of everything you're
Mm.
saying. Um, I feel like some spin-off series are like Fraser in that it's like it identifies its own, it creates its own identity and it becomes its own thing, and that's what makes it a success. But I don't think that's necessarily the only measure of success when it comes
Oh
to
yeah, yeah, I agree.
spin-offs. Like I look at say Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, and where Better Call Saul achieved with being a spin-off series of Breaking Bad is that it is essentially just another season of Breaking Bad, and it's up there and it's at the same standard, and
Yeah.
it's you can consider it as good as, but it's just telling the same story in the same timeline, but it just happens to go backwards and forwards at various times within that timeline. But essentially, it's just filling that content void that we have. Without ever feeling like content that is just specifically made to fill a void. It feels relevant, it feels pertinent, and it feels that. And I feel like that's where House of the Dragon is hitting. At its peak, I'd say it can be. And when you look at episode 4 of this season, I would rank that as probably one of the best 10 episodes of Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon we've ever gotten. So at its peak, it can be up there with anything. And I feel like if the show, and I feel like it's going to succeed and stick the landing in season 2, um, I feel like we can say, yeah, that's probably like up there. It's not one of the best seasons of Game of Thrones, but it's probably around, it's definitely better than 7 and 8. You know what I mean? It's definitely better than when Game of Thrones got shit. And you could probably look at like, I think season 4 is the high point. I think for me, season 2 might be a low point if I'm remembering correctly, though I need to rewatch. Um, I know obviously we had the red wedding at the end, but like a lot of it was just Tywin sending, Ravens for the red wedding.
Mm.
Um, and it's probably like, oh, maybe it's pitched in around there. Season 1, actually, I'd say it's probably season 2 could be as good as season 1, which is very like just kind of meh until Ned Stark changes everything. So I think that's where you're looking at. Like, how does this fit and nestle into something? Well, I don't think it's ever threatening to, outshine Game of Thrones at any stage. I feel like for this season, and again, I've made the conscious decision not to read ahead. I've read up to this season in Fire and Blood, but I don't want spoilers, and I'm going to try for years of my life avoid that somehow. I don't know if I'm going to be successful, but I'm gonna go down swinging. Um, I feel like just knowing story, I feel like the entire arc that we're gonna finish up on in season 2 is based around these new dragon riders. That's the big story they're telling, and that's what's gonna culminate here. And we're probably gonna get a lot of like we've seen Ulf, we've seen these random people, and then there's this random storyline about like, and so I feel like, yeah, they're probably going to be dragon riders of varying success, and that's going to be what the story is. No idea where that story goes, obviously. So maybe it's the most sensational thing ever. I don't feel like what they've shown us indicates that that's going to be the way that it goes. So I feel like it's probably limited in the size of the story it's chosen to bite off in how much you can deliver. But I feel like they're nailing it, and I feel I'm looking forward to the last two episodes.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
mean, you said you're very positive about it, and you're not implying it, but I don't want
yeah,
anyone to
yeah,
get that I'm being pessimistic. I guess
I
what I'm
agree.
being is more cautious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, like Game of Thrones is something that is very near and dear to me. I'm an absolutely massive fan, and I, I'm enjoying this perfectly, but I kind of wish it was a little tidier.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And there is the past two episodes have been messy because they're they're again, it's like to write an episode, you have to have something happen sometimes, and it has to be that episode. And I feel like this part of the story doesn't have that, but it has about 16 different things happening. So you know they have to build up to that kind of part of it. So yeah, I think that's a fair thing. And again, I don't think you're being negative. I just think that comparing something to Game of Thrones is a high comparison,
Yeah,
obviously, in your mindset. So that's fair. Dan, always a pleasure to have these discussions, and I'd love to catch up with you before the end of the House of the Dragon season. So we'll see if we can make that
definitely.
work at times. Before we go, I want to wish you, and if everyone can get onto social media, and wish Dan a very happy birthday. Uh, joining us
Thank you.
here on your big day. So thank you as always. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to plug, or if not, do you have anything that you're watching or enjoying or reading or anything that you just want to give a special mention to?
But I actually finally started and finished The Bear because you guys wouldn't shut up
Nice.
about it. It was always sold to me as it's just stress on stress. So I'm coming in from a pretty stressful job, going, "Oh, I'm not watching this shit. I don't care how good it is." So our week off, we started it 3 days, 3 seasons, loved it. If you're like me and you put off watching it, don't.
Okay, great. Did you find with the third season, did you like well if you were watching in a binge, a lot of people were disappointed with the third season because they felt there was a bit of a dip, but you're obviously not watching it in that like so did you feel that or did you feel it was just like this is all just great TV?
No, I felt it flowed very, very solid. So that's actually very,
Hey.
very interesting. Like I said, I kind of went into it with a particularly large amount of misinformation. So, and there was no one trying to deter me from watching or anything. It's just everything I got was from maybe people that I wouldn't normally kind of talk TV and stuff with, but they were all watching The Bear because it was very much in the zeitgeist, and they were like, "Oh, it's this and it's that," and it's like, and they described the show. I'm like, I don't want to watch that. Sounds fucking awful. And then when I was like 3 episodes into season one, I was like, this is not what was sold to me at all. So we powered through, and yeah, I really, really liked it, and I felt like that there wasn't many low points, and I think
Okay.
that it's down to how we consume media nowadays, but essentially watching them as 3 movies. Yeah, I really, really liked them.
Okay, that's really interesting to kind of frame our discussion. I didn't know you'd done that, so I'm glad we got to get your thoughts
Mm.
and different perspective on that. So amazing stuff, Dan. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your birthday. Thank you so much, and hope to catch up again soon.